You want salt paper? You know my parents are and my childhood friends are in the back of the
عصور يا خي عصور شيل ايوه
my parents.
Snoepjes bij de hand. Snoepjes bij de hand.
Oh, ja?
Yeah, hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger on this Friday evening. We're going to hear the case that a coalition of Dutch organizations and Palestinian organizations have brought against the Dutch government over their inability and unwillingness to act over the situation that we are all distressed about, and that we're here to talk about the situation in Gaza. This event is part of a series of Justice for Palestine events that is hosted by the Pakhuis de Zwijger. This is one of the last. There will be a couple more before the end of the year, and we strongly ask you to support both Pakhuis de Zwijger and the organizations that are setting up today's event that you're here to witness. My name is Sean Macheza. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and I work here in the Netherlands with the Transnational Institute, which is based here in Amsterdam. I will be your moderator for the evening. I will immediately point out and say that I am no legal expert. I'm not an expert on Palestine. I'm not an expert on Israel. But I think that puts me in a rather good position to ask the questions of this panel today, who are indeed the experts that are going to be dealing with the issue today. Being the moderator gives me the task to introduce this issue. How does one contextualize what we're here to talk about? When I took on this task, I spent quite some time trying to think about, okay, so how does one introduce the issue? How does one talk about the facts on the ground, talk about the feelings that go with that, with those facts, talk about the experience that a lot of us here are here to process and to think about? How do we deal with the rage that we feel? How do we feel with the despair that we feel, having seen all that we have seen? Ever since the events of the 7th of October and what unfolded afterwards, we have witnessed what happens when a genocidal machine goes into overdrive. We have failed, we, the people of the world, have so far failed the people of Palestine. The fact that we have failed so far does not mean that we stop trying. We've seen people go out and march on the streets. We've had protests. We had people go to embassies. We've had people go out onto the street and face violent police repression, violent repression from state organizations. We've seen different methods of engagement with the powerful. Litigation is one of the main methods that we have seen over and over again. If we are living in an international rules-based order, then litigation should be the one way we can stop an actual genocide as it is happening. But in January, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which is based here in the Netherlands, ruled that what we were observing already then had the markers of a genocide. The killing continued. We've had the International Criminal Court issue an arrest warrant and say, there's a plausible case that what we are watching is that thing that we said would never happen again. It's still ongoing. We have seen cases brought against countries like the Netherlands, which Frank is going to talk about today. But there is a deliberate, ongoing reticence to stop what we're all seeing. All the countries in the world that are signatories to the Genocide Convention have an obligation to act. The Netherlands in particular, being the host of the International Criminal Court, being the host of the International Court of Justice, being the host of all these international legal institutions that supposedly are the fundament of this rules-based international order, should be at the forefront of practicing what the Netherlands has preached to the rest of the world for all this time. We have not seen that happen. Rather, we have seen the Netherlands push back against all the litigation that has been brought against them. Even until now, with the case that Frank and Lydia and Raji and Tassim are going to talk about, I will introduce them in detail as we proceed. The Netherlands continues to send weapons parts, to trade with Israel, continues to act as if everything is normal, refuses to push back. What we have today is we're going to go deeper into this case where a coalition of Dutch organizations and Palestinian organizations have come together to say, we would like the Netherlands to act. Today's panel has Frank Slijper, who's Arms Trade Project Lead at PAX, which is a peace organization based in the Netherlands, the largest of the peace organizations here. Lydia Deleu, who is a researcher and strategic litigation lead at SOMO, the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations. They are going to give us the facts of the matter, what is going on, what are the issues that have been put forward. And then after that, Raji and Tassim are going to give us a bit more about the legal implications of these facts. What it means for the Netherlands to be put on trial for failing to stop a genocide. Please support the case. This case is crowdfunded. So as you listen and as you hear more and more about what's going on, please remember that all of this that is being done requires resources, requires funding. So the QR code will lead you to where you can fund the case. And if you have questions that arise as our speakers make their presentations, please do keep them with you. We're not going to have a Q&A after each speaker, but rather a Q&A session afterwards when everyone has spoken. And at that point, you will have the opportunity to ask any questions for clarification or follow-up. You will get an opportunity. We'll have somebody who has the microphone who will come to you. I don't want to say much more. Let's leave it to the experts to break down for us exactly what is going on. Frank, I'd like you to go first, and please tell us what's going on with this legal case in the Netherlands.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation, and glad to see so many people here on a Friday night. The case that we started last year basically started 7 November when Dutch newspaper NRC broke a story where they really revealed that because of a leak in the ministry, they got to know that after 7 October 2023, lots of transfers of F-35 fighter jet material were going to Israel, and that at least 2 people in the government had warned the government that they believed that that was incompatible with Dutch policy. In that same newspaper article, Lisbeth Zegveld, one of our lawyers, was interviewed and asked for a reaction, and she indicated that that indeed was a clear violation of Dutch arms export policy and basically was illegal. And so the next day, or actually that same evening, I was texting with Lisbeth saying like, hey, you're basically suggesting that we need to start a court case. Do you? And she said, yes, of course. Some back and forth, and the next morning, with a couple of organizations that Pax is working with, SOMO, Amnesty International Netherlands, Oxfam Novib, and the Rights Forum, there was a meeting organized, and I think after a week, we decided to continue, not to go into too many details, but we had to act quick, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lydia, but after that week, there were 3 organizations left that could really go on and had the mandate to start the court case, which we did. 4th of December, we had the first hearing in the Hague District Court. We lost that on the 15th. There was a big disappointment, but the small win that we saw there was that there was the recognition by the judge then that he indeed saw that the risk of the Dutch government being complicit in violations of its export commitments under the Arms Trade Treaty and EU legislation was clear, but the judge had some other issues, again, without going too much into detail, that he could not. I'm always very bad in legal terms in English, so we could not win in the first instance. So we were still convinced that there was a good chance for us to win the case, so we appealed, and fortunately, and on the 12th of February, the appeals court, again in The Hague, basically on all accounts, said that we were right in everything we put forward, and immediately, that's to say within a week time, the government had to ensure that no F-35 related exports would leave the Netherlands straight to Israel, or I say straight, but it didn't say straight, no F-35 related exports to Israel. So that was a major breakthrough, because I've been involved in a couple of arms trade litigation cases over the past 20 years, and the sad story of all of them was that we always lost them for many different reasons, often very technical ones about whether civil society organizations have a right to sue the government, sometimes what sort of court you had to go, etc. But with that knowledge, because we've also learned from all these cases, here we were at the right court, we were allowed by the court, and more importantly, on all the important facts where we were pointing at violations of human rights, of international humanitarian law, the judge agreed that that risk was indeed so clear that the Dutch government had to stop these arms transfers. Very sadly, the Dutch government said, yes, we will obey, we will make sure that nothing leaves the Netherlands to Israel, but immediately appealed against the appeal. They went in cassation. I think that's how it's translated in English as well. So that's to the Supreme Court, the last station where you can go in these sort of cases. And that's where we were in September. And before I get there, in the meantime, quite quickly after that decision by the appeals court in February, it became clear in interviews with ministers and other government officials that when they were asked, like, hey, yes, you seem to say that nothing will go from Woensdrecht, the Air Force base, where a lot of, where there is a warehouse, basically, where F-35 components are stored and shipped to countries all over Europe that fly with the F-35 and Israel. But what's happening with all the other bits, because they're Dutch companies that produce parts for the F-35 that go to the US and that are part of newly built F-35s, including ones that have been ordered by Israel and that eventually go to Israel. And the government was quite clear, several ministers in saying that no, the court didn't say anything about it. This is only about direct transfers from Woensdrecht to Israel. So that for us was a reason to start a case within the court case, basically a non-compliance case, where we again sued the government and basically demanded that they would also stop the transfer of any F-35 related parts and components through the US, where the F-35 is built, and then on to Israel, and also to make sure that any Dutch components would not, that Israel would need for maintenance of its F-35s, which has been using a lot over the last year, that they could not make use of any Dutch components to replace any broken parts or whatever. Again, at the district court, we lost that case, and again, we appealed. But because we were also awaiting the Supreme Court's verdict, we appealed technically, but we decided to wait with the case itself until we had a little bit more clarity about what the Supreme Court would do. And then, fortunately, and it's strange to say fortunately in these cases, but last Friday, the Advocate General that always advises the Supreme Court in these cassation cases had a very positive advice in the sense that it was basically rejecting all the claims the government made in cassation and basically said that whatever the appeals court had decided in February was decided on proper grounds. So that is a very important advice. I've been told that in most cases, not in all cases, advices by the Advocate General are being followed, but it's no done deal, definitely not. But we're very hopeful that most likely in February, the Supreme Court's ruling, the final ruling in this case, will be in our favor, and that would be very important because for the first time, a judge in the Netherlands has stopped the Dutch government from doing certain things in violation of its international obligations. And of course, we hope, I mean, we've been a lot in touch with people in other countries that fly the F-35 fighter jet, that also contribute to the whole program, that also have a role in the whole supply chain, and also try to sue their governments to make them stop supplying F-35 related parts to Israel. I see the clock there ticking and my time is almost over. Happy to answer a lot of questions later on. Yeah, when you talk about arms trade and wars, it's never a happy topic. But in this case, what gives me a lot of strength is that finally there is a way to stop a policy, to make at least, how do you say it? Now I lost my, no, at least to make sure that the Dutch contribution to a genocidal war in Gaza is being stopped. It's very unfortunate that we need courts for that, but it's the only way we could, and better this way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's Frank. Just a reminder, he's the Arms Trade Project Leader at PAX, which is a peace organization based in the Netherlands. Frank, so would you then say that this prior case gives us hope, per se, for upcoming cases, or was there something in particular that was specific about this case that makes it not so transferable to other issues?
It's always on a case-by-case basis. Every case is different, of course. What I think was very important in our case was that there was very specific evidence of these transfers to Israel, and that we could make the direct connection between the use of F-35 fighter jets in the bombing of Gaza, and I think that very direct link is very important, and that's my experience also from previous cases, that a broader demand is more difficult to get. I mean, simply the barrier is very high at the court to get anywhere. But I think also when you have established this, it really gives opportunities for further litigation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We can only hope that this opens up other opportunities for using the rules in the Netherlands to hold the Netherlands accountable. And our next speaker is going to talk about, again, the same issue of the Netherlands collaborating with an overtly genocidal state, and not necessarily in the transfer of weapons per se. I will not preempt her presentation, but collaboration is broader than just the F-35 parts and weaponry. And Lydia DeLeeuw, who works with SOMO, the Center for Research on Multinational Corporations, which investigates the impacts of corporate players and enablers per se. She's going to give us a little bit of the perspective from the Netherlands and the role of corporations in the trade with Israel. Lydia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. First, for full disclosure, I want to say that besides being a researcher with SOMO, I'm also the chair of Stichting Kifaia. It's an organization that has been supporting health workers in the Gaza Strip for the last 25 years. And Stichting Kifaia is also a group that is part of the coalition in this court case. But I'm speaking with my head as a researcher with SOMO, having looked at corporate complicity in the occupation, in the colonization, and now my scope has widened to looking at corporate complicity in a genocide. I will explain, I think just to pick up where Frank left off, he said very specifically that, these F-35 parts and how they are used in attacks, unlawful attacks in Gaza, is what created that hook for that court case. And then making the bridge to the new court case that is focused more widely, I want to explain how they're connected, but also how they're different. So in the new court case, we are more broadly looking at the prevention of genocide. And that is a far higher bar for states to meet that obligation. They must take all measures reasonably available to them to prevent a genocide. So in such cases, you do not have to prove that a single spare part or a single bullet ended up being used in unlawful attacks in Gaza. The state has the obligation to make sure that this genocidal regime cannot have the ability to carry out a genocide. So therefore, in the new case, we are asking for a full embargo on the transfer and the export of arms, arms parts, and dual-use goods. Because in our view, every of those little pieces contributes into the ability to carry on the genocide. So therefore, it is indeed a much higher demand, one more difficult to meet. But unfortunately, we also have to recognize that we are in a stage in history where we have never been before. Never before have we watched and witnessed a live-streamed genocide, day in, day out, fully documented. Aid workers being killed, press being killed, doctors, no aid gets in, starvation. I mean, I think everyone here is well informed of the atrocities that encompass what's happening. But never before have we live witnessed it on our screens, and never before has the ICJ, at the time that it was still happening, said that it is plausible that a genocide is unfolding as it was unfolding. I mean, Amnesty International, in the space of these 14 months, has been able to write a 300-page investigative report, and still the crimes continue. So I think that puts us in not only a position to try to argue this in court, but I would say also an obligation on our side to try to make the Genocide Convention what it is. It should be not only an instrument that you can use to hold perpetrators to account afterwards, but it should be an instrument for prevention. And that's how we try to use it. So going to more on the corporate side of things, I will explain two tracks that are in focus in this court case. One is indeed the arms embargo, which, if I have time, I'll elaborate on later. The other side is the corporate involvement in the settlements and, more broadly, the occupation. That is something that SOMO and other organizations have been looking into for many years prior to the start of this genocide. And in the Netherlands, the applicable policy to this trade, specifically trade with settlements, is referred to as the ontmoedigingsbeleid, which is a so-called discouragement policy. And I always say that it is neither discouragement nor policy. It has no clear goals. We have, SOMO together with the Rights Forum in January 2022, issued a request for information, for a public information request with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we asked for all documents that pertain to the policy and the practice regarding settlement trade. We are now almost 3 years on, and we will have a hearing in January of next year where we appeal, the lack of disclosure before a court. But the information that we have received so far paints quite a bleak picture and only reaffirms why we started this case. So from the documents that we saw, there's no clear goal stated. It's not clear what the government tries to achieve. And the only thing that they see in scope is where companies are directly contributing or directly facilitating the construction and maintenance of settlements. Fair enough. But then at the same time, they say it is up to companies themselves to decide whether or not they want to do business in settlements and with whom they do business. And to me, I mean, I don't think you have to be a jurist or anything to see the incompatibility of both statements. That on the one hand, companies shouldn't be involved in the construction and maintenance, and at the same time, you say, but it is up to them to decide. So internal emails and communication in the ministry shows that there's no policy, that there's confusion, and that they try to find ways to let companies carry on with what they're doing. There has been internal legal advice issued that says this is in violation of the right to self-determination. The Netherlands is possibly violating its international obligations. And these companies that are continuing to do business in the settlements may be liable under our own Dutch International Crimes Act. So now we have absorbed this policy into our court case because we want to stop any trade with the settlements. But there's something more to be said about the settlements, is that there's no such thing as a settlement economy on the one hand and an economy of Israel on the other. They're inherently linked, they're one system. So there's one electricity grid, there's one water system. Academia is one. the banks, the financial system is one, and there's even a so-called boycott law that was put in place in 2011 that prohibits companies, prohibits actors from choosing to do business in Israel and choose not to do business in settlements. So if any state is going to impose an effective policy on trying to stop the settlement trade, they're going to have to look much broader than what economic activity takes place in the settlements alone. And this is not just me or Somo talking. I'm going to quote something from the documents from the state, an internal communication. And it says that one public official writes that the interwovenness of settlements with the entire Israeli economy is large. Almost every Israeli company has a link with the settlements somewhere, somehow. So the state knows what they're doing, and in the hearing that we had on the 22nd of November in our genocide prevention and settlement trade case, I mean, there's no nice, I think, phrase or word to capture the whole case, but by and large. On the 22nd of November, we had a hearing, and it became very clear that the state doesn't have a response to our legal argumentation. Because they know they cannot undermine their own laws, but that is exactly what they're doing. So the Dutch International Crimes Act would prevent or would prohibit such corporate involvement, because the construction of companies and the acts that are accompanying the construction of settlements are in fact war crimes. So it is for example, there's many, there's a long list, but one would be the transfer of the population by the occupied power into occupied territory. That's a war crime. But you're not moving people, you're not moving Israeli settlers into empty land. There's people living there, there's Palestinians living there. So it comes with forcible transfer of Palestinians, also a war crime. It comes with the pillaging, it comes with the destruction of private and public property. These are all crimes under international law. And would also be crimes under Dutch law. Maybe let's see how much time I have left. Yes, maybe a few more things to say on the practice or the reality. What does it mean that the Netherlands lets this all go? It means that since 2020, we have a UN database that lists companies that are complicit or that are involved in, they don't use the word complicity, but that are involved and invested in different ways in the settlements. And on there, since 2020, we are seeing the names of Dutch corporations. Journalists have written about it. Civil society has criticized it. We've had many conversations with the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and criticized it and said, how can this be? When is there going to be any action taken? And in those conversations, we've been told quite clearly that no action is expected to be taken. So therefore, we are continuing on two tracks. One is to try to hold the state to account and force it to take measures through this court case. And the other direction we have taken is file a criminal complaint against Booking.com here in the Netherlands. And the legal theory reviews there, I won't elaborate too much, but it is one of money laundering, where we say Booking is listing accommodations and property located in illegal settlements. And so therefore, the revenue that they get by renting out those properties is an unlawful, illicit money flow into the Dutch economy, and it becomes a money laundering offense. So the predicate offense would be indeed the moving of population into occupied territory, but what the company is doing is getting rich off of war crimes. I think my time is almost up. So maybe one more thing that I would like to elaborate on regarding corporate complicity. Beyond arms trade and weapons, of course, weapons and drones and whatnot, everything that's used by the army is considered under those military instruments or trade, arms trade, etc., and dual use strategic trade instruments. But I think there's more, and we want to look at more in this new case. So, for example, me and a colleague, we came across a company that is sending electric wiring components to the major Israeli arms manufacturers. It's not something that is listed as a military or dual-use good, but we are gravely concerned that those products are actually used and processed into weapons. Another element is something that I think you will have seen in the horrendous news coverage about it. Are the dogs trained to be part and parcel of the military operations in Gaza? I will spare you the horrible details, but they are used as weapons and they kill. Those under export information are not listed as weapons nor dual-use goods. They would just be listed as animals, mammals, or not even dogs. I think dogs is a subcategory. So they won't be captured, right? And they are lethal. If you want to prevent genocide, you do not allow trained dogs to be sent to the army that is using them in the besieged Gaza Strip, or even in the West Bank, in the occupied West Bank. So those are the types of supply chains that we want to expand towards. That is where I think there's a difference or a complementarity between the two cases, F-35 and this new case, is genocide prevention is about everything. There has to be a holistic review of policy, and so that the Dutch state does everything it can to prevent genocide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I'm just curious. You work with you research you don't work with them, but research transnational corporations.
I work with very powerful colleagues.
They are, by their very nature, I think, slippery institutions, right? It's like the Hydra snake with multiple heads. You get one here, and it shows up there. What would you say would be the effectiveness outside of the Netherlands? Like, say we succeed with this case in the Netherlands, isn't it only just opening up an opportunity for the Hydra to show up elsewhere and nothing really changes?
I mean, the effect won't be as large as we want it to be. But the thing is also that the Netherlands is a tax haven, so a lot of companies are quite comfy here. And there's you usually find a Dutch hook somewhere. Just like when you go on holiday, you usually run into a Dutch person. It's the same with companies. There's usually some kind of presence or connection here. So I think the question is about where does the Dutch court have jurisdiction? And the actors that we're investigating at the moment, to add more evidence in later stages of this case, is we're looking not only at the big fish like Booking.com, but also there's this really random bunch of individuals in Brabant that are involved in signing off the bills of lading, signing off these transports of electric wiring components from India to Israel. Now, we don't have to be in India to fight that supply chain. I would argue that we can go after Dutch individuals that are knowingly signing off on these bills of lading. And in fact, that supply chain has peaked since 7 October 2023. So we definitely see a connection to military action. So I think we have to be creative. We're not naive. We're not going to catch everything. But and it's also about creating blueprints, right? Amnesty International has said there's genocide in Gaza, and states must do more to prevent it. And I think they also call on civil society to do whatever civil society can do to hold their states to account. So I think we need to build a practice and legal rationale and cases together, one by one and in parallel. So I hope, it's a one building block.
Thank you so much. I think I'll have some other follow-up questions, but we'll come back to them once we have all the speakers. Once all the speakers have had their turn. So these are the facts. This is the issue as we're looking at it from a Dutch perspective. But it of course has broader ramifications, right? This case in particular has reverberations across the world and will hopefully lead to change where it matters the most, and we're talking about Palestine. So the next part of our session focuses on really the broader implications of this legal case. I think I'll start with Tahsin, who is a senior legal researcher at Al-Haq, Tahsin Elayan. Al-Haq is a Palestinian human rights organization based in the city of Ramallah in the West Bank, founded in 1979. And they monitor and document human rights violations committed by parties that are involved in this conflict, of which we're seeing the latest iteration of a flare-up of violence. And they issue reports and findings and produce detailed legal studies. Tahsin, can you tell us a little bit more about what implications this case will have in this context of today?
Thank you. Hello?
Yeah, it's working.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you all for coming to listen to such unpleasant stories. They are not nice, but despite the fact that they are not nice, you have come. So thank you very much, all of you. I have been asked to say a few words about the legal obligations of third states under Common Article 1 of the 4 Geneva Conventions, as well as Article 1 of the Genocide Convention. And when I say third states, I mean states who are not party to a specific armed conflict. The question relates to whether third states who are not party to a certain armed conflict have a legal obligation to address IHL violations and induce states to stop these violations. This issue actually has been controversial for a very long time, but now there is a consensus that this article, Common Article 1, creates these obligations. So it's not an entitlement that is given to states. It is an obligation to act to stop the violations of IHL. And the controversy arises regarding responsibilities that emanate from the external dimension of obligation to ensure respect. I will explain more, rather than the internal aspect of responsibilities. So by external dimension of obligation to ensure respect, we mean the obligation of third states to act beyond persons and entities under their jurisdiction and authority, meaning that the Dutch state should act with respect to persons outside its own jurisdiction, outside the Netherlands. And this external dimension of the obligation or external obligation to ensure respect did not arise, did not begin from the moment the Fourth Geneva Convention or 4 Geneva Conventions were drafted. It developed with the time. And this is by virtue of state practice and by virtue of law also, specifically by virtue of Article 31, 3b of the Vienna Convention of the Law of Treaties, which stresses the need to take into consideration any subsequent practice in the application of the treaty which establishes the agreement. So if there is a practice that emerges after the treaty has been adopted, this development must be taken into consideration when an interpretation of the treaty takes place. In this article, in Common Article 1 of the 4 Geneva Conventions, there are layers of obligations. One, there is the obligation to respect. And the obligation to respect can simply mean not to violate obligations of the convention. And the second obligation is to ensure respect. And this obligation to ensure respect has two levels, one internal and one external. Internal towards its internal bodies and external towards other states. The internal level means that states, parties, commit to guarantee, to respect the respect of the conventions by their own organs and populations. This is what Lydia was speaking about when she mentioned the involvement of companies and businesses in the selling of spare parts and many other things to Israeli occupying forces or to Israel in general, to be used in the killing of the Palestinians and to be used also in violations of IHL. The external level goes beyond that and requires, it goes beyond what is required under the internal level by requiring states to take proactive measures to address violations committed by a third-party state. The obligation to ensure respect externally is a positive obligation, and it must entail action, meaning that the states have to take action when it comes to the external aspect or external obligation. And in case a state does not take any action, it might be breaching its obligations under international law. And this obligation can be fulfilled through due diligence, meaning that the states have to exercise due diligence to fulfill their obligation towards this commitment or this obligation. And what's the content of the measures that might be taken depends on different factors or various factors. And this has been explained by different authorities, including the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and other organizations. And in the words of the ICRC in its 2016 commentary, the content depends on the specific circumstances, including the gravity of the breach. So this is one of the factors, the gravity of the breach. The means reasonable available to the state, that's another one. And the degree of influence it exercises over those responsible for the breach. States have, or superpowers have influence over other states. And in our case, the United States, we believe, has influence over Israel, and the Netherlands has influence over Israel if it uses its economic and political powers. Because the duty is primarily positive in nature, proactive steps must be taken. The ICRC expressed this as follows: states must do everything reasonably in their power to prevent and bring such violations to an end. So practical things, practical steps must be taken. Another source of obligation in order for states to fulfill their obligation towards this treaty, i.e. Geneva Convention, emanates from what we call erga omnes obligation, which is an obligation that is owed to all, meaning that all of the international community must act in order to prevent the occurrence of this violation, and all of IHL norms are classified as erga omnes obligations. And this was expressed by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, in the Barcelona Tract case as follows. An essential distinction should be drawn between the obligations of a state towards the international community as a whole and those arising vis-à-vis another state in the field of diplomatic protection. By their very nature, the former are the concern of all states. In view of the importance of the rights involved, all states can be held to have a legal interest in their protection. They are obligations erga omnes. I'll finally touch on the obligation under Article 1 of the Genocide Convention, which reads as follows. The contracting parties confirm that genocide, whether committed in time of peace or time of war, is a crime under international law which they undertake to prevent and punish. Look, to prevent first and punish second, not only just to prevent it. They have to punish this crime if it happens, or the perpetrators of this crime. And based on all of this, all states have a negative obligation not to commit or be complicit in genocide, or positive obligation to prevent and to punish the genocide. The prohibition to commit genocide classifies as a jus cogens norm, which means a norm from which no derogation is prohibited. You cannot just say, I don't want. And this gives rise to an obligation erga omnes, which I just explained. Complicity in this crime can take more than one form. From the provision of political support or financial support to weapons and other forms. In the Bosnia-Serbia case, the ICJ stated that a state is complicit if its organs were aware that genocide was about to be committed, or was underway, and if the aid and assistance supplied from the moment they became so aware onwards to the perpetrators of the criminal acts enabled or facilitated the commission of the acts. The obligation to refrain from being complicit through aid or assistance begins at the moment the state becomes aware of the existence of serious risk that genocide may be committed. And now we have exceeded that level of knowledge. Everybody knows now that genocide, not only the Netherlands, all states who are involved or complicit in this genocide taking place in the Gaza Strip know very well that there is a crime called genocide and other crimes, of course, being committed in the Gaza Strip. And in light of this, we believe that the Netherlands is under a legal obligation to act to stop IHL violations and the genocide that Israel is committing in the Gaza Strip. And in my view, it's not only being committed in the Gaza Strip alone, it is being committed in the West Bank too. And it did not, by the way, start, in my view, in 2023. It has been going on since 1948 onwards. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Tahsin. You really lay out, give a lot of detail and a lot of the specific reasons why the Netherlands is on the hook in this particular instance. Does the Netherlands' role as a country and its participation in the EU make different rules for them? What agency does the Netherlands have outside of it being a member of a bloc? Because we've seen also the bloc, the regional bloc itself, acting in a particular way towards Israel. Could you please just break that down a little bit for us?
Yeah, maybe my colleagues can answer this question better than me because they know the type of support that Netherlands is supporting or providing.
Maybe two short comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, please.
One is the EU is not a signatory to the Genocide Convention. The Netherlands is a signatory to the Genocide Convention and is a state with its own obligations. So they cannot defer to the United States to take responsibility for the F-35 parts. They cannot refer or defer to the EU for other political decisions. And my second comment would be, there are limitations in terms of how they can take certain measures. So for example, trade, a lot is indeed outsourced in terms of decision making and rule setting to the EU. But there are examples of what is possible, and we argue in this case that it is possible for the Netherlands to take unilateral, individual measures. And I think one example of such an action could be, we can look at Ireland, that is moving forward with an occupied territories bill that says a ban on trade with settlements. So this is one example. There's many more. No, but the Netherlands has its own responsibility and must move, cannot wait.
Awesome, thank you so much. So we have our final speaker, Raji Surani. He's the director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, which lobbies for legislation that incorporates international human rights standards and basic democratic principles. Raji's been working recently quite a lot at the ICJ and the ICC, working on the cases that are being brought against Israel. He'll tell you a little bit more about his work. Raji, the floor is yours.
Well, at this moment, while we are sitting in this nice room, there is people for the last 14 consecutive months massively killed, massively their houses destroyed, and massively starved, and massively displaced. That means the harvest of sin since October 7th till today, only 17,000 children killed by this criminal belligerent occupation. It's very cheap blood, it's Palestinian. Who cares? 17,000? I would imagine now we have 100 Israeli hostages, prisoners, whatever you call them, in Gaza. Every day passing, almost 100 Gazans are killed, at least. This is the first genocide ever broadcasted live, streamed live on air at the real time. No state, no international body, no human being can claim we don't know. In the north of Gaza, now, what's happening for the last 2 months, I lived all my life one-way ticket at that part of the world. I never thought genocide can be practiced there. I'm not stupid, neither naive. We know the Israeli way of thinking, politics, social life. We know the criminality of the occupation. I lived all my life, for the last 40 plus years, dealing with the garbage of the occupation. War crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution. We never thought we will come to this. They surprised us. And they are doing genocide. 14 months. And the whole world watching that. Imagine you are a mom or dad, and you having your own children. You cannot shelter them. You cannot clothe them. You don't have bread, not food, bread for them. You cannot have water for them. And you cannot protect them. from death, which coming from the sky any minute, any time. No safe haven in Gaza. %85% of Gaza has been destroyed because they are targeted residential places, water desalination plants, the hospitals to treat children with cancer or cancer hospitals, the embryos of tens of thousands of children, one of the oldest churches in Gaza, bombed. Ma'madani Hospital, Baptist Hospital, bombed. Bakeries, everything, happened at the daylight. Even shelter places were UNRWA provided to them, to the people when they fled to the nowhere. With the children, with women, with old, young, sick people, they were killed and bombed. Imagine you see the body of your dears, or you know about the bodies of your dears. They are under the rubble. Dogs and cats eating them. For months, and unable to be recovered. Imagine the civil defense which rescue the people, the ambulances and the nurses, the doctors being targeted and subject to bombing and killing, and nothing can hide. It's at the daylight. And Israel say, yes, we bomb ambulances, we bomb civil defense, they are terrorists. What's wrong with that? We bomb the shelters. And we know, the recipient, we will get them. Now, this is going on and on. Why this is happening? Because in the past, never ever any neither criticized or hold Israel accountable. They do have full legal political immunity in Europe and in US, both. In the Security Council or at the international courts or national courts. Palestinian-Israeli conflict didn't begin today or at October 7th. In the long version, we have this conflict since Nakba, 1948, 76 years. In the short version, 57 years since the occupation. They were saying, we Palestinians, terrorists and demagogue. We are occupied, but we are terrorists and demagogue. Terrorists because we are victimizing the occupation. Occupation in law, in Rome Statute, crime of aggression by itself. We resorted to the Israeli legal system briefly, and the Israeli legal system legitimized every crime you can imagine. Torture, willful killing, house demolition, settlements, and I can go on for tens of these crimes. So they are genuinely unable, genuinely unwilling to hold accountable any. And there isn't one precedent in history talked about occupation. Under it, you can achieve justice and dignity for victims. So we said to our Western colleagues who said, this is the oasis of democracy in the Middle East, they have independent judiciary. No, even the judiciary, complicit racist. Then we resorted to universal jurisdiction, where we use national jurisdictions in different countries. And we managed to do it in UK, Spain, and Geneva, New Zealand, US, and different places, where we achieved results immediately. Legislations were changed. To provide more protection, we resorted to the ICC. And in the ICC, we are not yesterday there. We are there since January 2015. And we have the most wonderful, well-documented conflict in history. The difference between political rhetoric and law, in political rhetoric, it's fluid. I mean, something you say, prospective, you express your position supported by any evidence or thing you have. But in court, it's not as such. Very simple Western formula. Facts, standards, conclusions. Just as simple as that. And we, and in our international legal team, we're second to none. They did fantastic homework. And when President Trump, 2017, threatened Bensouda and the court, everybody was complicit and silent. Shame on them. The most important two courts on earth being threatened and no one say a word. We didn't invent it. Palestinians didn't invent ICC. They didn't invent the ICJ neither. This is the creme de la creme of the human experience. And then the investigation opened. Did we get anywhere? No, because the intimidation and political pressure and threats against the court. When October 7th happened, after 2 weeks, we were able to figure out what's going on. And we said, this is genocide. And we have genocide group, that's what's called. Lydia part of that. It was simple and clear to everybody. We pushed the ICC to move. It's in their mandate. It's their obligation. Genocide convention, it's called the Convention of the Prevention of the Crime of Genocide. You don't wait for it till it happens. The added value in this, you do it before it happens. Or when it happens, you promptly, immediately make cessation for it and stop it. And the ICC prosecutor didn't move anywhere. That's why we pushed for South Africa, which proudly took over and gave tough lesson to the civilized West about law and rule of law and ethics and the humanity. This fantastic regime who defeated apartheid and colonialism made history at the ICC, at the ICJ in January 11th. And we were all proud of that because he brought the pain and the blood and souls of children, of women, of the injustices Palestinians are having to the court. And that was super great, and we were very proud of that. Not as the Palestinians, but as citizens of the world, all of us. I mean, we were happy seeing justice at least being addressed probably. But afterwards, 3 provisional measures, decisions has been taken in January, in March and May. The court said this is plausible genocide, and they accepted the case. And they said, in these provisional measures, this should happen, A, B, C, D. But it was like very intellectual gathering. You know, the court say whatever they want, and the states don't want. The court doesn't have law enforcement agency. The states who should execute that. And none of them did it. And that's why Israel get along with it. What's the problem? And they criticize the court. And they accuse it of being anti-Semitic. And they accuse it of being the enemy of Israel. And that's why US, threatening the court. Then we having one thing more. We have 2 warrants against His Excellency Bibi and Gallant. These 2, just to remind you, after 3 days of October 7th, on October 10th, the President of Israel said, we don't distinguish between Hamas and civilians in Gaza. All of them complicit, all of them criminals, and all of them we will get them. Netanyahu said, Gazans should leave Gaza. Where to? To paradise. To leave it to where? And he means, of course, to Sinai. You have no place here. You don't exist here. Gallant said much more. He said, for Gazans, there will be no water, no food, no fuel, no electricity. Gazans are human animals. Shame on him. Shame on such a state. We are the stones of the valley. We have been there since ever, and we will continue there forever. And no power on earth, whether they do genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, can take us from there. We showed through the court of law, through the national jurisdiction, through ICC, through ICJ, that we have moral legal superiority in a criminal occupation who do war crimes, crimes against humanity on the daylight. And this colonial racist US and Europe, they are not only complicit, they are partners. Those children and women and civilians in Gaza, those hospitals destroyed, and the shelters in which hundreds killed, they are killed with American, European bombs and jet fighters who take them and drop them on them. And we cannot distinguish and say, you know, they have nothing to do with that. It's evil Israel. No, Israel doing that because when US veto politically at the Security Council the ceasefire, giving license to kill. And when the entire Europe and US provide with arms, and they dispute. Even after the warrants issued, they are disputing. I mean, the French president say, of course, I mean, if Netanyahu comes, we are not going to arrest him. What's the problem? And not only that, even Netherlands, the foreign minister, we were happy the first day, he said we will implement immediately. And the prime minister said, no, 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 I mean, we have to look at that. There is a way we can bring Netanyahu here. I mean, and should be problem. And we will find the venue and legal ways, I mean, to bring him. You are the host country for the city of peace and justice in the world. You are the guardian and the protector of the two most important courts on earth. Shame on you. You say, though these courts give decisions, you are not going to apply it. Where are you going to apply it? In Ouagadougou. In old Rome, there was two classes, masters and slaves. If you are a master, you can enjoy the protection of law. If you are a slave, you can be slaughtered or raped at the crossroad. We are raped at the crossroads. Prisoners, our prisoners, in Sdeti man, proudly, ministers, Knesset members, called those 11 soldiers who raped a Palestinian man from Nukhba. They called them the heroes of Israel. And they forced the government to release them all, though the video was released by somebody, I mean, with real conscience in the army. And everybody knows that. And nobody's doing anything. We are not going to be the slaves of the old Rome. We are entitled for justice and dignity. Our life do matter. I don't think this is a matter only for Palestinian. Of course, it's a serious matter for us. Every minute, every hour, it counts. Every minute, there is people who are starving, displaced, killed, by minute. And we have enough. But this is very basic test case. It's the existential of the international legal justice. Do we want ICC? Do we want really ICJ? Do we want the rule of law or rule of jungle? When Russia invaded Ukraine, Europe, US, oh my God, invasion, occupation, how it comes? Shame on Russia. Ukrainians entitled for self-determination. They have the right to resist the occupation. By all ways, by all means, with the armed struggle, they call the free European people, go help them, fight with them, take the arms, end the Russian occupation. And they sanctioned Russia with incredible waves of sanctions. More. They went to the ICC, neither Russia or Ukraine party. And within 40 days, the prosecutor was opening office in Kyiv. More, NATO say we will back Ukraine with money, with arms, politically and legally. And they did. We were happy. And we said, oh, finally, they are using our rhetoric. All what we were working at for years against the occupation and self-determination. Are we bleeding for states to implement law? Are we reminding them this is your obligation? You have to think about, companies not. Where is the association agreement? Where is it? Article 2 bluntly says if there is a state violate the association agreement between Europe and Israel, this should be suspended promptly and immediately. We have the Eurovision with Israel. We have the football with Israel. We have the basketball, youth exchange, scientific exchange, academic exchange. And now, we are pleading for them. Listen, there is genocide. But you have to do something. Companies shouldn't work there. This is a big shame. And really the fight, as it for Palestinians, it should be for man with big M. Do we want world with rule of law or rule of jungle? We are contributing our share in this. But what's going on really too much? Our word ugly. We are appealing for them with something to respect and to take. And they are threatening the court. They are threatening it. The mighty states, US, is threatening the court and telling them, if any of you dares, we will do this and that. This is the European American support for the independence of judiciary, for rule of law, for respect of court decisions. What culture they are bringing to our world? What a future waiting for us and for humanity.
Indeed.
We are in the right side of history. We are defending just, fair, right cause. We are in the right side of justice and law. We are not going to be good victims for any, whether Israel or the Europeans and the Americans who are complicit and partners in the genocide. We will never forget or forgive those criminals. We will never lose the hope that tomorrow is ours. We are entitled to end the occupation, to practice self-determination. We are entitled for dignity and freedom. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raji, for that passionate presentation and for telling the story from your perspective and from the perspective, I think, from capital letter M, as you said it, capital letter humanity. Raji is the director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, as I already mentioned. And I think he has, this talk just now really points to the actual human aspect of this. I really do not know how to express it. I think a lot of us suffer for words when it comes to this topic, and it's just more real and more powerful when it's someone who is really in it and who's telling it like it is. We have 30 minutes left of our time. And I'm sure there are some people in the audience who have follow-up questions for each of our speakers. And I would like to open it now to the audience, to just, if there are people who have any questions, I have some people who are going to assist me there. Please raise your hands and you will get a chance to ask a question going forward. But Raji, the point you make seems there is an establishment of institutions that are supposed to be the last resort, right? And what happens when those institutions seem to not react to the final appeal? From your perspective, for the people here that are in the Netherlands, and for globally people that might be watching from anywhere, what are the small steps that you would like to see people doing further than what you have seen already? I know it's a difficult question. I know it's not an easy one to answer. But so we do not end up in despair, what do we do? In short.
I think free, committed people need nobody to tell them what to do. We are contributing our shares wherever we are. We have, for example, fantastic international legal team working with us and cooperating for years and years together. They are bringing the best of their experience to us and the most wonderful help they can do to us. And we work with them together in universal jurisdiction, in ICC, in the ICJ. People should know their venues. South Africa didn't ask the trade unions what to do. They can contribute. When the university students went to the campuses, whether in US or Europe, nobody asked them. We didn't go talk to them, you know. We are committed to give the facts, to give them what's the real story, what's happening, you know, in the ground, if they don't know. But now, with this internet and this Facebook and Twitters, everybody knows. Yeah. So everybody should stand. And I'm sure the free, committed people across the globe did, and a lot waiting for them to contribute.
Thank you so much, Raji. The facts are out there, the onus is on us. So, do we have somebody in the audience who has some questions for our panelists? I see a raised hand over there. I'm trying. We will take 3 questions. I'll take 1, 2, and 3 for now. And then we'll come to this other side after we've had a response from the panelists.
Yes, and maybe for the audience, just so you know, it's recorded. Feel free to speak, but that you are aware of it.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for sharing the information that you did with us. My question is specifically to Raji. You know, in public discourse, whenever previous genocides have been spoken about as well, there's always an emphasis on genocidal intent having a very high threshold, you know, which has to be proven for a court to take action. But in the case of, you know, Gaza, we've all seen it live streamed for more than a year now. So I want to ask, how high exactly does the threshold need to be after, you know, 300 pages of reports from Amnesty, from journalists in Gaza on the ground showing us every day the attacks on civilians? Is that not evidence enough for, you know, international courts to take action already?
The question.
Isn't there already enough proof, and what is the exact threshold specifically on having to prove genocidal intent? Because the word intent is there, and is there not enough proof for intent?
You know, pages of statements given by Israeli politicians clearly stating their genocidal intents vis-a-vis Gaza. So.
I mean, first 3.
Perhaps we'll get a couple more questions, and then we respond all at once.
Thank you for this very powerful speech, so to speak. It comes in the heart. Thank you very much. What is the question? There's so many, but we are looking at the exports, but shouldn't we also look at complicity and imports? Because fueling the occupation, the genocide becomes a thing we should look at. Test it on Palestinian weapons, AI systems, intelligence, etc., is part of the business model of apartheid, racism, Zionism. So if you don't look at if we only look at one stream and we don't look at the other stream, this monster will not be defeated. So how will you take that into the legal equation?
And final question from the back over there.
Thank you. Should I stand up? So thank you all. I think this question might be mainly for Lydia and Frank, but I think it's for everyone. So we all understand really well the US's purpose for financing Israel and the huge Zionist or lobby that supports Israel in the United States. But maybe could you shed a little bit of light on what is exactly this connection of the Netherlands supporting Israel? Like, what is at stake if the Netherlands were to stop supporting Israel? If there's something with economic ties, maybe just, I'm sure it's more than just like an emotional or something that's like racist. I'm sure there's like some specific economic tie that stops the Netherlands or forces them to put so much, you know, of their integrity on the line to support Israel. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think we can deal with those three questions for now. I would assume the first is for Raji, the second for Lydia, and the third perhaps for both Lydia and Frank. So,
Me to go on all questions now.
all right, so Lydia.
Yeah, so for genocidal intent, I mean, without going into too many technicalities, again, the court, the ICJ, has already said there's a plausible genocide. So for the Genocide Convention to kick in, nothing else needs to happen. We don't need 500 additional Amnesty International reports and other reports. It's there. And like you said, I mean, there is a endless list of statements from political officials to military officials, and it runs down all the way to the lowest ranks in the military, these genocidal statements of human animals and others. So we have everything we can have, except for a ruling, which will take time. A court ruling will take time. But I think that the Amnesty International, and I recommend everyone to read the summary, I think the Amnesty International report did an excellent job of explaining to us what genocidal intent means. A question was asked at some point to Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on occupied Palestinian territory. A German journalist asked her whether she had found any document that showed that Israel had genocidal intent in Gaza. So, okay. This is not something that ever happens. A genocidal regime will write down, we, on date X, regime Y, it's not there, but I think we get as close as we can be. Unfortunately, I mean, because it's very painful to stare this in the face, these statements to, you know, no water, no food, no electricity. I mean, it doesn't get clearer than that in my view, and for the implementation and kicking in and the adherence to the Genocide Convention, it doesn't matter and you don't need more. But I think I would agree with the way that it was written down in the Amnesty International report that it is, at this point, it's undisputed that there's genocide in Gaza.
Can I add a few words to that?
Please go ahead.
And even if there was no statements by Israeli officials, what is going on the ground proves the intent that Israel is committing genocide. So, no question. Plus, it is true that the ICJ has said that a plausible genocide is taking place. And the ICC might be looking into that. And they will, of course, I mean, the ICJ will deliver its ruling, but it will take time. But the problem is not with the courts as such. The problem is with the implementation. Because the ICJ has issued rulings on provisional, and ordered provisional measures to be taken. Nothing has happened. Why not? Because the lack of political will, because they do not want, as simple as this, because Palestinians' blood is cheap. This is the way they see it.
Thank you. The next question was, what about imports from Israel, the alternative, the reverse stream, the reverse economic stream, I think, if I got that correctly. I suppose, Lydia or Frank?
I just want to hit this quickly.
Yes.
Israel export to Europe 63% of its trade based on the association agreement. They are tax exempted. So Europe rewarding Israel for the war crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution, and genocide by allowing this to come in. I mean, we are not, I never ask sanctioning Israel. I don't want anybody to sanction Israel like Russia. Just stop this shame of giving it privileges. All these, when they are part of the revision, it's a reward. When they are part of the even UN caucus of Europe, it's a reward. Youth exchange, our children being killed, being blockaded, unable to leave the 365 square kilometers for 17 years. We are suffocated socially, economically. Apartheid system imposed in the West Bank. Between cities and villages and camps, people cannot move. Disconnected. And we are rewarding by twinning the Israeli cities with the European cities, with the Dutch cities, with all these privilege, with the scientific cooperation, with the academic cooperation. It's big shame. Just to stop despoiling them. Stop encouraging them doing genocide. Why Europe is the enemy and US of 17,000 children has been killed? Why? I mean, what harm they did to them? What 14,000 women did? It's simple and easy, and I think if ordinary people, because governments, honestly, I have no illusion, I'm telling you, business as usual, before and after. But if people don't move, nothing will happen. That's why we appreciate very much, you know, the grassroots act. I mean, by having cases, by demonstrating, by being in the campuses, whatever. That's, I mean, how things can be changed.
Thank you so much. And the last question we had was about the Dutch ties to Israel. Frank, maybe? Lydia?
I think, I mean, what we heard in the court case all the time was the main concern of the Dutch government was losing its face vis-a-vis the Americans mostly. They bought themselves into the F-35 program back in 2001 already. They paid $800 million contribution fee to become a partner in the program, and all they seemed to care in the court case was that they were losing trust, confidence in them, and basically, as the Minister of Defense said in the Parliament a couple of weeks ago, when the Parliament was talking about this court case, it made clear that, oh, okay, if we cannot send anything from Woensdrecht Air Base anymore, that's not the end of the world, because it can go from the US. But if we can no longer supply any parts to the US that may end up in Israel, then we have a big problem. And that's the main concern. It's political, military, economic, industrial. And of course, the Dutch relations with Israel play a role as well. But I think first and foremost, its relations with the US and being afraid of being kicked out maybe in the end of the F-35 program. And that's how it's always been. That's how it was 40 years ago when Israel bought the F-16, and Dutch companies such as Fokker at the time were part of building that plane, and it has always been like that, unfortunately.
Great, thank you so much, Frank. I think we might have time for a last couple of questions. We'll take one over there. Last question, somebody else has a burning question? Okay, right over there, you already have the mic. So those are the last two questions. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as we would like to have. Let's start where the mic already is. Yeah.
Hi. We hear about conventions, about intent, about laws, about states should be obliged to some things. But if a state didn't sign and didn't agree, they are free to kill. So yeah, we are not obliged to Geneva Convention. So we're gonna kill everyone. What is this logic? What we are speaking about?
Right. Thank you. One last question over there.
I'll also get up. Thank you. My question is to Lydia. So I'm a student in international law in The Hague. I've been following SOMO for quite a while, and I've been particularly interested in the case against Booking.com about the money laundering. And as far as I can tell, I'm not a student in Dutch law, so I'm not an expert, but the question is that it's disputed whether if the act that is connected to the money laundering, the illegal act, is not criminalized in the other country where the act is happening, then we're not sure if that qualifies as money laundering. And the problem is that Israel is disputing the applicability of the Geneva Conventions in the occupied territories. So therefore, we couldn't argue under current Dutch law potentially that the occupation, the transfer of the population, is a criminal act, which would then refer to the applicability of money laundering. So how do we get around this non-application of the Geneva Conventions when factually, yes, they should apply because it's an occupation, but if it's not criminalized, how do we make money laundering apply in the very end?
I have maybe one small addition to this question, because the focus also was a lot on the genocide happening now in Gaza and the West Bank. But what about complicity? Because you also said there's ties with Israel. Why not go for an Israel broad society boycott? And also added to that, as the two speakers said, since 48 the crime is happening there. Not allowed to return, right of return, the apartheid crime. I can start living in Israel. I have a Jewish grandfather. Raji probably can't. I can somehow. So there's a list of crimes. So why not held the entire entity accountable, and to what extent has this been explored as well, and not only in the two sides that were drawn later?
Thank you. So we have a question on the Genocide Convention, if it's optional and you can do what you would like. Perhaps Tassin, you want to take that one?
What was the question on genocide?
The question from the gentleman in the back.
Yeah, if it is a state party or not. I spoke about Jos Kogan's norms, and even if you are not a party to any of these conventions, even if you did not sign, if you have not ratified, still you are under obligation to respect and to abide by the rules of international law. When we say norm Jos Kogan's, these are norms that cannot be violated by anybody, irrespective of whether they are a party to any of the conventions or not. And if they are committed, these prohibitions create what we called in the beginning of this meeting erga omnes obligation, meaning an obligation on all states in order to act to stop the violation and hold perpetrators to account. So it's not a matter of I am a state party or not.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tahsin. And the last question we had is the booking.com question. Lydia, I think you might take the lead on that one.
Yes, I'll try to translate the legal jargon into accessible language. So the legal rationale that we use is the Financial Crimes Act in the Netherlands, which prohibits money laundering, is tied directly to crimes under international law, which are also criminalized under Dutch law, which are also partially jus cogens norms. So even if Israel put in writing, well, actually they do put in writing that the settlements are legal, it doesn't matter for the criminality that is to which the financial crime is attached. And it goes even further under Dutch law, and that's why I think it's such a beautiful, for all the nerds in the room, such a beautiful legal framework, because you can apply it to a lot of forms of corporate complicity. You can tie, under Dutch law, you can tie the financial crime to the war crime in such a way that, in fact, it elevates the liability of the company to the liability. It would be seen, legally speaking, as a war crime itself, because it is benefiting from it. So I think for grave breaches of international humanitarian law, for international crimes under international criminal law, this legal rationale, this legal hook, I think must be, or should be, ideally be applied on many more companies and many more situations beyond Palestine. But there was an additional question about the, oh, sorry, I'm going to paraphrase it wrong. Maybe someone else wants to respond. It was about, from Max, having looked more broad, do we consider looking more broadly beyond
the time of October 7th? Please, would you like to take that one as well?
And I would refer people to read up on our case, a new case against the Dutch state, which elaborates that there are many more areas in which we are making the case that the Netherlands should do more under international humanitarian law, and in fact it must also cease its military cooperation. That is just one element, and we tie it also to the right of self-determination, the illegality of the occupation as a whole, in addition to the illegality of the settlements. So the strands that we are trying to capture in the legal case is much broader, but for sake of time, I focused on one piece, which was the settlements. But of course, I'm here and available for questions or via email after this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lydia. And thank you so much to our amazing panel that has given us so much insight. Can we give them all a round of applause? This is not an easy topic at all to listen to, let alone to talk about and to dive deep and try to express all the feelings and all the thoughts that arise when you think about the actual fact that a people are being wiped out in front of our eyes. I think one of the toughest things is dealing with the despair that comes with the helplessness that comes with seeing what we're seeing on our screens on a daily basis. But I think there are many things that we can protect ourselves from, but to look away from the pain in the world is the last thing that we should be trying to do. I think the onus is upon us to bear witness. The onus is upon us to remember. The onus is upon us to tell the children what happened, what is happening, and what is likely to happen. I think I would like to thank you, all of you here on a Friday evening, who decided to spend your time to come here and find out about this one little prong at which we're pushing back against imperialism, pushing back against occupation, pushing back against racism. It's a massive monster that is wrapped around our globe. And whether we fight it in Palestine, or we fight it in Sudan, or we fight it in the Congo, or we fight it wherever it's manifesting, we're fighting it. And I think we have seen a lot of hope and a lot of despair, a lot of rage, but we've also seen hope. We've seen people go out onto the street with freedom on their lips. We've seen people say, never again. And they're fighting and they're saying the name Palestine. And it is being recorded for the future that we're fighting back. Palestine is all of us. Palestine is the emblem of the type of freedom we would like to see for all humankind. So thank you for coming this evening, and thank you for participating in this conversation that we know is not over and that we know still has many chapters to it. Progress is being made. There was a lot of time when it wouldn't be acknowledged that this was a genocide. I'm going to read from the Amnesty International report that was just published this week. The international community's seismic, shameful failure for over a year to press Israel to end its atrocities in Gaza by first delaying calls for a ceasefire and then continuing arms transfers is and will remain a stain on our collective conscience. Governments must stop pretending they are powerless to end this genocide, which was enabled by decades of impunity for Israel's violations of international law. States need to move beyond mere expressions of regret or dismay and take strong and sustained international action. However uncomfortable a finding of genocide may be for some of Israel's allies. It's upon us to fight. It's upon us to end it. And as I said, despair is a very alluring, it's quite tempting to fall into despair. But I'm going to end with a quote from James Baldwin, who for me encapsulates a lot of my thinking and a lot of what we should be holding on to, the light we should be seeing at the end of the tunnel. He says, "I have never been in despair about the world. I've been enraged by it. I don't think I'm in despair. I can't afford despair. I can't tell my nephew, my niece, you cannot tell the children there is no hope." So let's live today, despite the gravity of this issue, with a bit of hope. It will get better. Thank you. Still open. Thank you.